Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Hello, you're watching another episode of Oregon Voters Digest. My name is Theresa Griffin Kennedy. I'm an author and a poet, and I'm also a Portland writer who wears a parka, so just refer to me as Theresa with the parka. I have a great show today. We have two wonderful authors today. We have J.D. Chandler, and we have Amy Templeton Harper. And I also just want to make reference to Phil Stanford's new book, Rose City Vice, Portland in the 70s, Dirty Cops and Dirty Robbers, is now available for pre-order. And it's a wonderful book. I've read it already. I have my signed copy here. It's a great book, and it's just, I can't say enough about it. Anyway, so we're here today with J.D. Chandler and Amy Templeton Harper, and I've got some questions. Basically, I just wanted to have you guys on so we could talk about writing. And you're both writers, and you've both written poetry, and you wrote that wonderful poem that I loved so much.
The Gauguin?
Yes.
If I Could Be Gauguin Today.
Yes.
Everyone seems to like that one.
It's beautiful. So I guess the first question I should ask is, just something that impacts really all writers as they mature and kind of develop. They go between fiction and nonfiction. What do you like about fiction writing as opposed to nonfiction writing?
Me? Okay. Well, and I've done quite a bit of the nonfiction because I've got my four history books about Portland, and it was kind of good for disciplining my writing because I had to tell the story that was real. I couldn't just make it up. So I learned to tell the story in an engaging way. And then, now that I'm writing fiction, because I'm working on, this is the not quite final draft of my latest novel. And it's a little bit freeing because I don't have to tell the story that actually happened. I get to make that up. But I always like to do the research, and I like to have my stories ring true.
Yeah.
So this is based on real things. In fact, all of the Afghanistan war scenes are real situations that I put my character into and fictionalized that way, but each of them actually happened. One of them in the Vietnam War, but all the rest were actually from the Afghanistan
And your
War.
novel is called Nightingale?
Nightingale, yes. Yeah. And it comes out of my history research because I went down this rabbit hole when I found a CIA connection to Portland. And so I got curious about what the CIA was doing at that time and what they were doing here in Portland. And it led me into the whole heroin opium trade with Southeast Asia, which was what the CIA was doing here, is they were running drugs from nationalist China into the United States and blaming it on the communist Chinese. And that led me into the earlier history of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and the drug experimentation and the quest for a mind control drug that the CIA was completely devoted to in the 50s and the early 60s. And so I just took some of that research and extrapolated what it would be now if they'd continued this and been going on with it for the last 50 years. Where would they actually be in this research? So it's kind of a nightmare.
Interesting. And I've read it, and it's really good. So what do you like about fiction writing as opposed to nonfiction writing? Because I know for myself, being a really new fiction writer, it's so creatively freeing. It's like, because I was like a diehard nonfiction writer and fiction, and then about a year and a half ago, I started writing fiction. I've been having a blast.
I think it's a double-edged sword because it is freeing, and you can write anything you want, which can lead you in directions that are not good. When you have to stick to the facts, it tells you how to write itself in a way. With fiction, you get the freedom, but you also have to make a lot more choices.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I question myself more when I write fiction. Is this something that is believable? The whole term stranger than fiction. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.
Yes.
And people will read your fiction and think, that's either not believable or it sounds like fiction, but we have to ask ourselves, what is good fiction?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not an easy genre to understand or even master, but I've had like so much fun the last year and a half writing short stories, and it's different. It's definitely a different route.
I think you put your finger on something really important there. When I talked about learning discipline from writing nonfiction, I think that's what I was getting at. But if you're writing nonfiction, it's believable because it happened. So you can write about it, and it can be crazy, and some of this stuff is crazy, but it happened, so it has to be believable. But you're right, in nonfiction you have to think, or in fiction you have to think, could this be real? Would people believe that this would happen? So yeah, you're right, truth is stranger than fiction.
and all the fiction I've written in the last year and a half or so, there's some part of it that's autobiographical. You know, maybe to a large extent, maybe not, but you know, there's no way I can just completely think up a story that's 100% out of my imagination. There's something that I have to be able to connect with, whether it's place, whether it's a scene that I remember and the actual layout of this place. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I personally think that every word that anyone ever writes is autobiographical.
Yeah, you know, that's so true.
We only write about ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. You know, F. Scott Fitzgerald said that people write the same story over and over, and he sure did. He just couldn't get away from, you know, the neurotic damsel in distress and the stoic man. I mean, that's what he wrote. Every short story, every novel was all based on that one theme. You know, and he recognized it too. He's one of my favorite writers, of course. But
so, do they call that the writer's voice, or is that just thematic? You can't get away from that.
That's an interesting question. It really is, because when I loved Rose City Vice.
Oh gosh,
I'm a Phil
it's
Stanford
so
fan.
good.
I love the era, and he
Yes.
does such a good job of telling the story and saying what really happened. And he's got a very strong voice.
Oh, he does. Yeah.
Kind of a sardonic, kind of
Yes.
witty, kind of breezy, and it's fun to read because of that
Yes.
voice. But I don't know if that theme idea is necessarily the same thing. That's an interesting question, though. It's worth looking at.
Yeah, Phil Stanford has a great voice, and he writes in active voice effortlessly, which I kind of envy.
I'm sorry, Phil doesn't write effortlessly.
Well-
I've gotten to know him over the last few years, and there is a lot of work that goes into
Oh
a
yeah,
little book.
absolutely. Well, all of the research, all the facts that are in this book is just really astounding.
And the writing. The writing.
Yeah,
I've seen a couple of different versions of this book, and
Okay,
and the
all right.
short story at the end, I worked with him on in a couple of different ways. This is very heavily crafted. This is hard work, the writing that he does.
Yeah, it's so fun to read though, because he writes in present tense and he writes in active voice really well. And the last story is great. It's about this car dealer here in Portland, Buddy Moore. It's a fun story. It's a fun story.
It is fun, and it's real story, which I think is even better. But he writes it as a Runyon-esque Christmas tale. It's Dino's Christmas, and if this guy loses all of his money, and if he can't get it back, his kids aren't going to have Christmas.
Right. Yeah. Basically, some crooks came to Portland from Chicago.
I don't remember.
They came to Portland from, I think, New York or Chicago, out of state, and they tried to con some criminals here in Portland. And, well, not criminals, but, you know, they're creative with the rules.
Used car dealers.
Used car dealers.
Same thing.
So in 1975, there was a shortage of antifreeze. Okay, and that's kind of the crux of the story. Anyway, this guy, Buddy Moore, made sure that these outsiders didn't con, you know, the hardworking citizens in Portland, and he saved the day, and it's just a great story.
I'm kind of hoping Dino's Christmas becomes the classic Christmas story of Portland.
It would be a great movie. I mean, I read it, and it's only like maybe 3 pages long, but it's like you said, it's filled with so many details and facts and everything that it could easily be turned into a screenplay, a movie, you know, a TV series. It's a great story. But anyway. So we were talking earlier about publishing, and you mentioned, JD, that Portland really lacks a powerful publishing presence, and I agree with that.
Or really any publishing presence. We have publishers in town, but
they're all small.
And it's such limited access and limited resources.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the writers in town are dependent on out-of-town publishers who take terrible advantage of us.
Right.
You and I just had a bad experience with the Arcadia Press,
Yes.
who took over the history press, which
Mm-hmm.
gave Portland a real opportunity to start telling its story.
Right.
But then it turned out that the writers are being taken of such advantage of that
Yeah.
it's not really an opportunity at all.
Yeah.
It's an exploitation.
Yeah.
And we need to have a publisher here in town that can help us. We've got so many writers. Portland has been a literate city since its beginnings. The whole state of Oregon was founded on the idea of public education and literacy.
Yeah.
And the only thing the state has ever really been able to do well is turn out literate citizens.
Yeah.
We can't do anything
Yeah.
else, but we're still doing it. Kids are coming out of school able to read.
Yeah.
And
It's the weather. It's always rainy. We're always inside. Let's read a book.
and if you read,
We're not California.
If you read, people write, and we have a lot of good writers in this town.
Yeah.
That have nowhere to be published.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I will vouch for that.
Yeah. Well,
What are your
three
thoughts?
of us right here. Four of us. Actually, there's another one just off camera here.
Done. What are your thoughts on that? Amy?
You know, I'm still navigating the whole idea of publication. I started as a writer in order to write, not necessarily with the ends of publishing. And if I published, it would probably have more to do with my job than it would be the fact that I would ever expect to sell any books. And
Yeah.
because I write poetry, I realized I probably will never make a living at it. So that hasn't really been
Yeah.
my biggest concern. Although, yes, I think because there's so many writers and there's a huge community, there should be a major publisher in Portland.
Yeah.
Well, and the
Yeah.
option is to publish ourselves, which
Right.
is more and more an option. But as you're learning, it's a full-time job. It leaves you no
It's
time for
so
writing.
fun. Well, but it gives you incredible power.
Yes.
And can I see the copy of Dawn's book? This is my husband's book, and this is Amy's copy, Behind the Badge and River City of Portland Police Memoir. We self-publish this. We call ourselves Oregon Greystone Press. And I'm in the process right now of developing a new book with a young writer in Portland. Her name is Bethany Umbarger. She writes poetry and short fiction and nonfiction, and she's an incredible writer, and I really want to promote her. And I'm just determined that I'm going to learn what it takes, because I am tired of feeling like I have to peddle things that I write, beg to be published, and I'm learning the ropes of InDesign and And another thing is that Barnes & Noble is finally publishing self-published books as long as they meet their criteria, as long as they're high quality. And we're actually in the process right now of Dawn's book being sold through Barnes & Noble. And I told Dawn 2 years ago when the book was first published, I said, your book's probably going to be a sleeper. It's probably going to take at least 2 years for it to get around. And I was right. But it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating that we don't have a real big name, high-moneyed kind of publishing company here.
Well,
in
and
Portland.
I don't think we need a big name, high-moneyed. I don't want to have a slick publisher, but I want to have a way for writers to get their voice out there. Unlike
Yeah.
Amy, I would like to make some money from my book.
Me too.
That would be great.
I think we all would. I think we all would. It's.
But
It's
I
frustrating.
think it's a real need. And if there's an investor or a philanthropist who wants to help develop Portland's community, this is the most important place to invest,
Yeah.
is in publishing and getting the writing out. Because there's so much good writing that's going on right now.
Yeah.
I could name 24 good Portland writers that I know personally.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more out there. We need a place to let our voice be heard.
Yeah. I agree. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. You wrote Cramped Uptown, Amy, and this is your book of poetry and fiction and short nonfiction. And this is Cramped Uptown, and it is available at Powell's. And this was published in 2011.
Yes.
And this is the third printing.
fifth.
Fifth printing. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. And I've read this, and it's a wonderful collection of
I
really
love
nice
Spice.
poems.
I thought Spice was a beautiful book.
Spice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I liked it all, and the short story called Prime Rib. And you're working on right now. You're working on a memoir,
Yes. Yes.
and that's hard. It's really hard to write memoir.
Yeah, I never wanted to because I thought the market was glutted with memoirs.
And it is.
It's something I was more goaded into, I think, by friends than something I would have taken on myself. Of course, once I started writing it, I couldn't stop.
Good, good.
So I'm going to probably write it until I die.
And what's it about?
It starts out with my background, which is unknown to me because I'm adopted from an orphanage, so I don't know my birth date and I don't know where I'm from. And it's sort of a search to try to find my place in the world.
Sure.
Originally, I was going to write it about the years that I worked at Jiggles in Eugene, and a place called the Jubilee in Eugene, and a place up here called Stars. And I worked also as a stripper dancer in Virginia for a while. So I really wanted to make that the storyline because that was my true education. And I did it, of course, the cliche is to pay for school, which I did, but the education that I received in that job was more valuable than the money I was paying for tuition to learn about life.
We should talk about your stripper days sometimes because you worked at mob-owned strip clubs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I as one of, actually looking back now, it was one of my favorite jobs.
Jiggles was Colacurcio family from Seattle.
Okay, I worked in the one in Eugene, not the one in Tualatin. But yeah, and I think they're both gone now.
Yeah.
And you completed a PhD, right?
No, I ended
Okay.
up getting my master's in education curriculum writing, which is what I do for
Interesting.
PSU right
Cool.
now. But yeah, I've had several jobs. You were talking about how you've had 50. I've had at least 50. But my education has been about people, and the way I've learned about people is by having various jobs.
Yeah.
I've done everything pretty much in a restaurant, from cooking to serving to managing. I had a business for 10 years, a catering company. I've been a teacher. I used to be a property manager, so I know how to unplug a toilet.
That's wonderful.
I used to work in retail. I did some modeling. For a while, I would pretty much would do anything for money except prostitution, and that is one of the chapters in my memoir. Also,
It sounds great. Do you have any kind of a title thought of, or?
no, it's not. I mean, it's a work in progress. The joke title is "Memoirs of Not a Geisha," but I think that might have to change.
I like that. Yeah. Coming up with a title is sometimes a fluid process that takes a while. You know, it's interesting how that works.
Yeah, sometimes you have a title just right from the start, and
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know what it's called.
When Don when he wrote the first edition, he wrote his book in 91 and 92, he called it A Look Behind the Badge. And then we thought, we talked about behind the badge. It had to be behind the badge something. And then I thought of In River City, and I came and I said, hey, Don, what do you think? Behind the badge in River City. And he liked that because we
It's
live in
good.
River City,
It's a
you
good
know?
title.
And then when we submitted to the History Press, they liked it, but of course it was a memoir, so they couldn't use it. We thought of including the word Portland in it, so then it transformed
they
to
insist on that.
a Portland police memoir, and we realized that strengthened the title too. But yeah, titling a work can be kind of a long process. But let's talk about, you were talking about the theme or the arc of a book and how it impacts dramatic structure.
Oh, we kind of got into that conversation earlier, and it's been kind of a study of mine for the last year or so. For some reason, in my schooling, I managed to not pay attention to this, but the poetics and the dramatic structure
Right.
that makes a story move and grabs your audience. It's become really an interesting study to me, and I used it to write this draft of Nightingale, and I find that it really can work, and there's just some real simple ideas and real basic techniques that allow you to grab your audience and make them really care about your characters and even root for them.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you felt that way in a couple of places when you
Yeah.
were reading it, and I'm like, yes, that's
Jesse-
exactly what I was trying to do.
Jesse and Frank.
And when a character dies, you feel sad about
A lot
that.
of people die in this book.
Yes, that's why I called it a dangerous romance.
It's
Almost
action packed.
Almost every character dies.
Yeah.
Not quite. And sometimes when they die, they don't always die.
So it's kind of a political thriller, and it kind of crosses over almost in a way into like sci-fi maybe.
Yeah, I have always been a science fiction writer. I started writing science fiction stories when I was a teenager, and the idea of trying to extrapolate what this world is going to be like in a few years has just always fascinated me. But I can't keep up.
Oh my gosh.
Things change too fast, and by the time I get my story out, it's already happened.
Yeah.
And so I set this only a few years in the future, and I give just little glimpses of the future. You know, like the electronics they use, or the way they interact with each other, or the techniques that the police use. They're what they might be 4 or 5 years from now. And already some of it's already come true, so I still can't keep up.
Yeah,
Barely
you know,
science fiction.
I think probably my favorite sci-fi story. I actually have the graphic novel, but I haven't read it because it's kind of disappointing. The writing is just disappointing in the graphic novel. But the film V for Vendetta. I mean, if you want to find out just what's happening now in the world in America, just watch V for Vendetta. You know, it's pretty amazing. But yeah. So what is your process like for writing? You know, how do you write? When do you write? Where do you write?
I write all the time, and most of it I write in my head when I actually don't have anything to write it down. But
Writers write in their head.
Yeah, and
I do that. Dawn does that.
yep, you
Yeah.
come up with ideas,
Yeah.
and then you try to solidify them
Yeah.
later.
Right.
But I'm notorious for being a procrastinator and finishing things. So I have ideas, but it's more about, is that really what I wanted to say?
Yeah.
Is this ready to go?
Yeah.
But yeah, the process can come from anything, something I see, a dream,
Right.
my numerous jobs where I've met some very, very interesting people. They always have given me something
Yeah.
to write about.
I've experienced walking downtown and passing someone on the street and listening to those snippets of overheard conversations.
Yes, so real.
About 3 years ago, I started dreaming phrases and waking up and being like, what the heck does that mean? And then writing it down. Yeah. And I sometimes I'll go, you know, weeks and I won't write a thing because I need to just rest my brain, and then I'll write for, you know, a week or two every day for hours. But yeah, I have a very freewheeling kind of liberal kind of free attitude about about writing process and how it impacts writers differently. I've mentioned this before on another show, but I read an article in Poets and Writers magazine, and there was this really famous male writer in his 70s. I can't remember who he was, but I think he was a nonfiction writer and a poet. And he had this whole idea about how you have to get up at 7 every morning, and you have to have your lunch at 12, and how you have to write for this many hours in the morning and this many hours in the afternoon. And if you don't do that, you're not really a writer. I try to avoid those kind of polemic thinkers like the plague, because every writer has their own process, you know, and I avoid people that say it has to be done this way or else you're not really a writer, you know.
Yeah, and I think there's no such thing as really a writer. A writer is anyone who writes.
Yeah.
And we all write in various ways.
Yeah.
And some people are good and some people are not so good, but everybody has their voice. And I think that has always been my strength as a writing tutor, because I've done a lot of tutoring of writers. And my strength is that I can get the voice that's coming through and help them make it clear. I've worked with a lot of people who speak English as a second language in particular. And I love that. I love the almost clumsy use of language. It might seem clumsy to a native speaker, but it's not always clumsy. Sometimes it's kind of almost an awkward elegance in the way you say it, and it can change the meaning. And I like that. That's one of the things I like about the English language is that it's so flexible.
Yes.
But a writer is someone who writes.
Right.
And we all go through whatever process it takes. I find that mornings are the best time for me to do the actual writing. And with Nightingale, I tried something that I haven't done for a really long time, and I wrote everything with a pen first.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I haven't done that for a long time.
Longhand. What's
Yeah.
that? What's longhand again?
Exactly.
A lot of kids today don't know. They're like,
You can,
what?
yes.
You write with oh my, what's that? You know, it's like, oh my God,
It is
am I really
possible.
that old? You know.
It is possible
Yes,
to do
it
that.
is.
It's, you know, there's.
And I
it's-
think that you tune into a different part of your brain, a different creative part when you write longhand.
I think you do too.
Yeah.
And then
I do that.
And then in the typing, you
Yeah.
automatically have a second draft. So
Right.
you already are working on, because what I'm learning, and I've been writing for a long time now, and I've never really known what I was doing, but I'm kind of starting to get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is it's creating the words and then crafting them,
Crafting,
working them,
yeah,
and
exactly.
like it's like woodworking.
That's exactly what it is. It is an art form. And for myself, you know, the thing about writing that I've learned, I'm 51, I've learned that you just get better as you get older. And, you know, I know some kids that are in their 20s that have been writing for 3 or 4 years, and they don't understand why they, you know, the publishing companies aren't hunting for them, and they don't understand why they haven't made $1 million and why they're not famous. You know,
That's how I felt when I was 20.
Yeah. But I mean,
Why aren't you buying my science fiction stories?
I've been writing for 33 years. I've been writing since I was 18. And only in the last 2 years has it even coalesced and kind of come together. You know, I mean, that's how long it took me to even get any real notice. And I'm still a very small voice in Portland, you know, but yeah, it's writing is interesting.
Every voice matters.
It does.
Yes.
It really does.
Yes. And I think that was a really good point you made about people who speak English as a second language, because I think one of the best books written by a non-native speaker, I mean, seriously, Vladimir Nabokov. I mean, Lolita is one of the most...
Did you write it in English?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is the most fascinating... He was brilliant. It is the most
love his writing.
fascinating book. Puppy bodies, all those weird words he put together. His focus on the visual. He loved things that shimmered, glimmered.
I love Russian writers.
Shiny, sparkly. I mean, he just had this thing, you know, and it's... Lolita is a funny, sad book, but there are moments in the beginning that are just funny. They're just hysterical when he writes about this woman that he married and how he was, you know, he was tricked and it turns out she has false teeth or something, you know. But he was probably one of the most interesting writers, and I love reading books that are written that are translated. You know, Perfume by I think Patrick Suskind wrote Perfume, and it was written in German, and there's a different kind of voice that is in the books that have been translated from a different language. It has a different kind of feel.
It does,
and I love
and
that.
I majored in Latin American studies, so Latin American literature was a huge part of my studies in college, and I've read a lot in Spanish and in English, and it's very different. It's very different reading something in its native language and reading it as a translation.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a very different experience.
Yeah, I think probably my two favorite women writers will always, it's kind of a cliche, but Simone de Beauvoir and Marguerite Duras, you know, both French women. There's just something about their writing that I just love, and probably Marguerite Duras I prefer. But yeah. So I should have thought of some more questions.
Well, I'm sure we can think of something to talk about.
Certainly. So I can ask you a question. What was your first influence as a reader that prompted you to write?
Wow, that's a great question. As a reader, well, I started reading when I was 21, really seriously reading when I was 21, but when I was 18, I started writing letters, and I kept a journal, and I started like experimenting with stories. As a reader, probably the one book that most impacted me, believe it or not, Scott Turo's first book, Presumed Innocent. The last 2 pages where he describes Carolyn Polhemus. It's the only section of a book that if I read it out loud, I will like cry. It reduces me to tears because it's so well written, and it's about this woman, and I don't know if you've ever read it or seen the movie, but when I read that, I connected to it so much that I felt that urge to want to write something. And I think also writers tend to, emotional experiences impact them, and then you feel this insurgence of like, desire or a compulsion to write something. When I saw the film Blood Diamond with Simon Hunt, what's his name? He's a wonderful actor, but it also had Leo DiCaprio in it. But Blood Diamond, my daughter and I saw that film, and I came home and I was just so impacted by it that I wrote a poem about it. You know, so that's what I love about being a writer and an artist, you know, because it's like you said, JD, you do craft what you write, and I love revision. I'm weird like that. I love revision because it's that process of crafting that I just love. And I'll work on something for a long time and then feel really good about it, you know. And I try not to second guess myself too much because that can be a detriment, you know, when you're writing. But
Can I answer that question too?
yes, you answered that question. I'm sorry.
asking both.
Because I thought of two things instantly. I remember very vividly reading my first book with chapters when I was 6 years old, and it was Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary. And
Local author.
I loved the book. I loved the character. I've been a Ramona fan for my whole life ever since. But the first time I really had the idea that I might be able to be a writer too and tell stories was reading Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh yeah.
I was 12 years old when I read Slaughterhouse-Five. And I
still haven't
remember
read that. I
my
need to
dad
read that.
had to go down and explain things to the librarian because she wouldn't let me check it out. She thought I wasn't too young. But he explained things to her. And I read Slaughterhouse-Five, and then I read everything that he had published. And then all through the 70s, every time a new Kurt Vonnegut book came out, I read them all again.
Yeah.
So I just loved the way he could tell a story.
Yeah.
And I've tried to do that ever since.
I had favorite writers too. Daphne du Maurier. She wrote Rebecca, The Parasites, which is a very underrated book. It's probably my favorite Daphne du Maurier novel. But when I was in my 20s, I read everything she wrote. And then I went through a phase of Scott Turow. And then I also, probably my favorite novel to this day remains Suicide Blonde by Darcy Steinke. It's really a really dark novel about San Francisco, and her bisexual boyfriend commits suicide. And it's an amazing book, and I read it every year. It's just like, you know, but yeah.
So how about you?
You know, it's a difficult question. I think the book that made a big impact on me was I stayed in bed for almost 2 weeks in 7th grade reading Gone with the Wind because
Oh my
my
gosh,
teacher
yes.
had bet me that I could not read it within 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh, good
so
for you.
I read it, and it impressed me for its sheer size.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that you could blend history with fiction, because prior to that I had mostly been just reading history. I was more interested in the facts than I was about made-up stories. So I don't think I thought I could be a writer at that point, but I thought if I could do anything, I would love to be able to write something that has that sort of sweeping capacity.
Yeah, yeah. I have to say that one of the reasons I'm a writer today is because of my dad. My father, Theresa Griffin, he passed away in 2008. He supported me. He started telling me when I was 21, you know, I really think you could be a writer. And he supported me all through my 20s and 30s and 40s until he passed away, which is rare because he was a very old-fashioned kind of chauvinistic guy, and he raised me and my siblings, there were 9 of us, in a very chauvinistic kind of home, but he always encouraged me in my writing. And he also expressed to me his opinion that the best writers were women, which was also really kind of weird. He was kind of an interesting combination of enlightenment and kind of old-fashioned traditions and virtues and things, but yeah, I don't think I would be a writer today if my dad hadn't been so supportive, and it was probably the only really the most positive impact he had on me, because, you know, having 9 kids, you know, it was really hard for both of my parents, and we all wanted their love and their attention, and they were both just exhausted. So, but yeah. Do you have any other questions that you thought of that you would like to ask us?
You're
'Cause
good
I
at
think
that.
we have, yeah. We've got a little more time.
I mean, I love to talk to writers, and
Yeah.
really, I learn much more talking to other writers than I would say taking a writing class, because I don't think I ever have taken a writing class. And I was an English major at University of Oregon, and I had done the writing 121 and 122 requirement when I was still in high school. So I did
Wow.
not have to take a writing class all through college. So I
Cool.
didn't consider myself a writer. actually, I still question whether I'm a writer. Because when you're talking about revision, you love that part.
Oh, I love
When
it.
I think about revision, I always dread it, and especially if I see something already in print, I look at it and I think, oh, I should have done this differently. I should have done that differently.
That never seems
And
to end.
I know it's part of. I think it's part of being a writer, but it does make me question. Well, I should just probably just give this up right now.
Wasn't it Dorothy Parker who said, if you know a young person who wants to be a writer, the second best thing you can do for them is to give them Elements of Style by Strunk and White.
Right.
The best thing you can do with them, shoot them in the head and they're happy.
On the Kurt Vonnegut thing, have you? I'm sure you've written his or read his essay on how to write with style.
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that essay. He puts it straight to the point.
He's a
so.
beautiful writer, and I just love everything he wrote.
The Elements of Style, my dad, I think he mailed that to me when I was 23. And then he also mailed me a copy of A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf.
Another great book.
Yeah, Virginia
Woolf.
Okay. And I still have it. And he also eventually mailed me a really nice hard copy, really beautiful hard copy of The Elements of Style, which is a great book.
It is. It's essential.
And I'm weird too, because I enjoy reading literary criticism. I enjoy reading books like The Transitive Vampire, and probably one of the best books I've ever read about writing is Stephen King's On Writing. It's so good. It's like half memoir, half how-to book.
I think it's his. I'm a Stephen King fan.
Yeah, I
and
am
it's his
too.
most personal book.
It's incredible because you learn the story, the backstory of Carrie, that poor girl he went to high school with, and I read that and it just broke my heart, and you learn about just other elements of his childhood that are really interesting, and yeah, that's pretty amazing. But yeah, I also enjoy talking to writers and poets and painters about the creative process. It's just fun.
Well, I have an idea. It's not so much a question, but I think it's an interesting point, especially sitting here with two poets. Because I find writing poetry to be a much different process than writing anything else.
It is.
So talk a little bit about the process of writing poetry.
I'll let you go first.
Poetry. I took 4 poetry classes with Primus St. John. I'm so thrilled that I can say I took Primus St. John at PSU 4 times. He was probably the best poetry instructor there. And I learned, I think, a phrase, he called it condensed poetical language. Poetry is just packing a punch. It's packing metaphor, using language and making meaning in that way. It's a challenge, but it is very different than fiction writing or nonfiction writing.
Well, I have to say that I am in that same league because this book would not have come about if it had not been for Primus St. John.
Really?
Yeah, so
awesome.
Yeah, I don't think I had him. Oh, I did an independent study with him, but I didn't have a class with him.
He was wonderful. I took
yeah,
4 poetry classes with him, and I took Caribbean
amazing.
literature with him. I can't say enough about him.
Yeah.
26 years at PSU, and I think he's retired now.
He's retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I saw that his classes were available, I jumped. I'm so grateful that I was able to take him.
Yeah.
So.
That's interesting to me because I haven't written poetry for quite some time. Are we on a break?
I think we're going to head on to our break, and then please join us for the second half of the show, and we'll be talking about other things. Thank you. We'll see you in a minute.
This is fun.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
got my notes.
So you're watching another episode of Oregon Voters Digest, and I'm here with my husband Don Dupay and with Bruce Broussard.
Wow.
So what are we going to talk about, Bruce?
Well, I'm just thinking about what happened last week, so to speak. We
Okay.
we had the whole issue with the Rose Parade, you know.
Yeah.
And my first reaction when they said they were going to cancel it, I thought it was the entire Rose Parade aspect.
So
of it.
did I, and it turned out it was the Rose Parade on 82nd, right?
82nd, but as far as I'm concerned, that's part of the Rose Festival, and they should have maintained it because, you know, I participated in the Rose Parade the last time around. In fact, when we were running for office, and you know, you had a lot of kids that were involved, the bands were involved, and community was involved, and it was just fantastic. I mean, for them to have done that, that was fantastic.
And it was yesterday, right?
It was yesterday.
Okay, neat.
That was yesterday, and the thing that got me about that whole thing was that they also said on the news that police weren't going to be there because they were overworked and this, that, and the other. And boy, and guess what? Our dear friend,
Our colorful friend,
Jesse
Sponberg.
Jesse did an excellent job.
That's great.
He did an excellent job. He walked 2 miles. And he streamed that whole piece aspect of it.
Yeah.
And he was taking shots of everything and whatever.
Fightchurch.com.
Yeah, but the other thing about him was the fact that he lives from that community. And then you learn something else too. He was talking to everybody that was there. And guess what? The reason why they didn't have any problems, the community said there won't be any problems here.
Good.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And then there was this one guy that came out and he had the flag damped down. He was calling all kinds of folks. He was saying nigger this and Muslim this and I don't like no gays, all kinds of stuff and whatever.
Yeah.
And so the people in the community jumped on him. They said, "Hey, what are you doing? We don't want you here."
Right.
And then the other thing, then all of a sudden, someone came up to Jesse and said, "Well, the police said the guy has mentally ill." Well, you know what gets me about this is if he's mentally ill, take him off the street and put him in some place that he can be taken care of.
Yeah. There are no places
There are
anymore.
no places anymore. Bro.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There was a place named Damage. Isn't it still
Yeah.
open? up in
Damage,
South?
no.
They
Isn't that
closed
there
it
anymore?
down.
Oh, that's right. The developers got that. I forgot that piece. Yeah. So now all of a sudden it's on the street, right?
Yeah,
And everybody's making money off of it, right? The
They didn't put him in
pharmaceuticals.
Wapato either.
Wow, you gotta be.
They didn't
Oh
put him
my
in.
God.
No.
But anyway, but
no
it was.
place to put him.
But it was a very interesting deal, and I really got to give the kudos.
So
to,
was Jesse like the MC or he?
Well, he had his own thing.
His own thing, okay.
He's streaming. And
Well, that's good.
This way you can just.
Yeah.
You're right at home. You can just.
I think Jesse means well, and
He did a good
yeah.
job. He did a good job.
good.
And in fact, if I had anything to say with it, if I were to say to Ted Wheeler, I call him Ted right now until he gets to be mayor. He's still OJ10, so he's still Ted Miller. Don told me about that one. I didn't know about that. I was trying to respect the guy. He said, no, the guy is he's
Still learning.
He's still learning. Okay, but in all due respect, I think mayor should maybe consider hiring Jesse as a protest ombudsman.
A protest ombudsman.
Yeah. And then what he would do, he'd be going around kind of dealing with these folks because he's using the 4-letter words, and then everybody uses the 4-letter words, and then the cops use it too. But my point, it was very effective. My point is that we didn't have any problems. That's the key.
Good.
We didn't have any problems. But so I give him kudos for that piece.
Sure.
The other one was Don's piece.
How come the cops aren't they in control of stuff though? That's what bothers me.
Well, we don't know who the chief is yet.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, then we
Never
got,
mind.
now supposedly the chief was fired.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the board, was it that review board?
Yeah.
The review board told the mayor
Yeah.
that, hey, look here, this guy didn't do what he was supposed to do.
Yeah, he did get
And
caught.
then the mayor said, well, I'm going to do my thing. And he basically said, okay, let's get him off for a while,
I
right?
think he was suspended, right?
He was suspended
suspended.
by the mayor, right?
By the mayor, yeah.
And he got suspended. And all of a sudden, one day, the mayor hires him back.
He hires him back.
He hires him back. And then next
He
thing
must have taken a sensitivity training course.
Well, I think the sensitivity was the fact that
right, on the wrist.
Poor Ted. And then next thing you know, the police union, Daryl Turner comes out and say, hey, no, Mayor, you will not be going out looking for a new chief or this, that, and the other. We're going to take this one. We
Is that what
support
Daryl
him.
Turner said?
That's what he said. That went out in the press routine.
Because there's this whole idea of going out of state to look for a chief of police, and we don't need to do that.
Yeah, but who runs the city?
Yeah,
I mean, if you're the mayor, you're the mayor.
yeah.
There's no such thing as an employee going to tell me. I know he won't tell Don. Look here. Don, you have to say anything.
It's a sad situation.
It is a sad
because
situation.
We have a chief of police who was fired from his job and then reinstated for lying. And the whole thing about it to me is, do we want a police official Do we tolerate a police official
Yeah.
who has lied on an official document? And he got caught. And he got chastised. Now, we know he's a liar. What else has he lied on? Can I trust him anymore? No. So I'm sorry about that. You're just not going to be my chief of police.
Yeah.
How far down in the system do we have to go to find a decent chief? I don't know, but there ought to be a sergeant somewhere down there
Yeah.
who knows what's going on, who has the integrity, the background, and the experience to be the chief of police. I can't imagine going outside of the city to find somebody to inherit the mess
Oh,
we're going to have here this summer.
it's going to be a
We've
tough
got
one.
a police department who the top 10 guys are under investigation. We've got a heroin problem that is out of control. We've got a homeless situation that is
Yep,
out of
it's a
control.
toughie.
And who wants to inherit that kind of a mess?
I got the
You know
answer.
what?
I
It's
got the
going to be
answer.
so scary with this hot summer coming on. I'm not coming downtown.
I've got two
I'm
options.
going to stay in Beaverton.
No,
and I'm
no,
not going to
no,
come
no,
downtown
no.
anymore.
No, you're part of that second option. The first option, I think what we ought to do, Ted,
Said,
is that you need to hire Darrell Turner for 6 months for the summer. He's got the trust of the troops, right?
Right.
He's president of the union. There he is. Darrell, you take the job for 6 months, and your name is in the hat. Still go out and search, et cetera, et cetera. The other option he has is that he can come up with a contract, and Don and I'll take over. We'll
city
take over.
managers.
No, hey,
Yeah.
you're the cop. I'm the mayor. Ain't no
manager.
problem. We'll just do the job. Fair? Hey, Don, tell those guys here's that book. Here's the policies that they have to follow, the guidelines, right?
Yeah.
That's what we want you to do. Nothing else, right? Anybody goes out there, Don, fire him.
Yeah.
You don't even have to call
We'll
me.
fix it.
Right?
If
we'll just
Don
fix
was
it.
in charge, he'd completely reform the police department.
Well, I mean that's
And it needs to be the police department needs to be revamped.
yeah. See, they're really law enforcement officers. They're not even police or this, that, and the other. They're not cops. They're law enforcement officers. The laws that we, the people, go through the mayor. That's who we got the mayor. Or the high, basically, these are the laws we want you to enforce after we go through this deliberation, whatever. And then Don takes it up there and they say, okay, fine. Hey, Don, here are the guidelines. In fact, put together some guidelines for the laws that we just passed. Are they okay?
Yeah,
Fine, no
yeah.
problem. Once that's done, that's it. They're law enforcement officers. They're not cops. They're not police. They're law enforcement officers. And I think that's something that we need to understand. So my point is that it's really sad. I mean, and don't get me wrong, whenever one gets into office, if you're new, it's an OJT thing, on-the-job training.
Yeah.
We can't afford no on-the-job training,
Not now.
you know? And this guy had some exposure. He was a county chair for one time at one point in time. Spent a quick moment there. Wapato was still there. Didn't do anything about that. Then he went down to the bank. And he was a treasurer there for a while.
You mean Marshman?
No, I'm talking about Wheeler.
Oh, Wheeler.
He spent a
Right,
hot
right.
moment there. And then all of a sudden he hiccuped for a moment. He was going to run for governor. He said, oh, I can't do that. I'm going to have to run statewide. And Bruce is sitting over there. but the bottom line is that now he runs for mayor. And, you know, and I'll be right up front with you. I've been around this business long enough to know he wants Earl's seat, Earl Blumenauer's seat, or Ron Wyden's seat. And he don't understand. Things have changed. We got a very diverse society, and we've got to start talking about getting folks together and
Yeah.
communicating. And
Yeah.
and I'm not interested in the national. I'm interested in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, and Oregon across the board. We got to stop somewhere. So that's what he needs. He needs to focus on that end of it.
Yeah.
And I've called this guy. How many times we've called him? We've called him numerous times. I've emailed him.
I've emailed him.
So-
He never responded.
So now what we do, we communicate with him through this.
How do we communicate if we
we-
only get 3 minutes a week?
No, we get more than 3 minutes here. We get more than
Yeah.
3 minutes now. I mean, we get. But my point is that hopefully he can check this out because Teresa's the texter. She'll put him on Facebook. Does he get your Facebook?
I don't think
I would love to have
I've
the
sent him an
mayor on
email,
now.
but he
The mayor on what?
He never
I
responded.
would love to have Wheeler on.
Oh, Wheeler. You said Wheeler. I thought you said the mayor.
Mayor.
He's not there yet. He's on the job training.
Now you interviewed Ted Wheeler years
Well,
ago.
I interviewed him as a county, but I knew he was scared then. I mean, that's why he won't come back on the
Back
show.
when he was a little guy, he came on the show, and now
Well,
he's- now he's
I respect
too
people when you don't
busy
know
and-
nothing.
Yeah,
We don't know nothing. I try to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, and I'm not the mayor. I'm just a journalist. I'm just asking a question as a layperson. Got me? But the fact of the matter is, if you know, in all due respect, you can't run for mayor unless you got some background in that particular turf. because this is the living room of the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
And we don't have time to be sitting there talking about OJT. It just does not work.
Yeah.
It's a very, very important
Well,
piece.
not this summer. No.
He's got a tough job, and they need to get the
Well,
police
let me give you.
department
You got a
fixed.
little time. We got a little time. Let me
Yeah.
tell you. This is what happened here. Now you know Norma doesn't get involved in any of my politics. My wife, but she gets all my stuff, and we pile the paperwork and whatever, and then naturally we are both Republicans and Democrats in my household, so I can get the material. Sometimes, well, I'm not a registered Republican now, so I've got to struggle to get that because I'm a Libertarian now. But we get Republican stuff here, and then she's a registered Democrat, so we get the Democrat stuff here, and then we basically look at the stuff. And so she pulled one of her flyers out. I go through that stuff, and she says, "Honey, look at this." I said, "What do you mean?" Because she knew I was heavily involved in the lead thing, right? I
Yeah,
looked at
yeah,
the brochure,
yeah.
and I looked at the brochure. This is all about the bonding thing. I said, "There's nothing wrong with this." She said, "What's missing?" I said, "What do you mean, what's missing?" I said, I looked on the edges of it, nothing. I said, "What is it?" She said, "There are no blacks in it."
Oh yeah, yeah.
You got this big brochure. There are no black. Maybe an Asian. You got Hispanic. You got white kids, but no black.
Yeah.
How can you ask the voting public? I mean, it just blows your mind.
There aren't any
What are
black
they
people
doing?
here?
Huh?
There's no black people here.
I know that. That's what I've been trying to tell.
Haven't you figured it out
But-
yet?
but if we go
it's the
through-
whitest city in America.
That's right. But if we go through assimilation, then we just have Americans.
Yeah.
If we just go on and get this thing going, get it straight. Because I'm tired of hearing this deal about this minority deal. I like the whole thing. I like the 90%. I don't like the 10%. I want to be able to change. I want to jump to the 100. So bottom line is that my point is there's no color. Okay. So as a result of that, I started looking at all the brochures, and you start looking at all the folks who are running for office, and depending upon what they're running for, like the city council. I mean, not city council, but the Portland School Board. Here's one lady who's running, Rita Moore. I'm going to be interviewing her, and you look at her brochure. She's got the bond measure, right? And then I see her running, and she's got 2 senior citizens, no kids, on the brochure. And the only folks that I see that's going to be paying the bill are white folks.
Yeah, white folks.
And so you're going to pay the bill. I'm not going to pay nothing. But they should have a group of folks that kind of relate. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
they need to have something that says this is what the people into visuals.
Shows more racial diversity.
Well,
Yeah.
not racial, just people who are going to be paying the bill.
Right.
Because if I'm not,
Right.
I'm not paying. So for instance, I'm not voting for this thing right now. And the same thing here. Now here's this lady here. She's got Amelia. I don't know what's her name. But anyway, she's
Jamila.
running. Jamila. Now what is that? Is that
That's probably Jamila. Or
what is that? Now was it Hispanic?
Yeah, Hispanic, I would say.
Right? But
it
they are.
could be, or it could be.
See, I see how you hesitate. See, that's what I'm coming from. It's got to be a real deal. You know, my point is that if she's going to be representing folks, but she does have some kids, but I want to know whether or not these kids are going to Portland Public Schools.
Probably not.
But
I think they're her family.
you know, but my point, I want a disclaimer here. I mean, we're talking about Portland Public Schools. That's a very important piece. I mean, we got visuals. We got to be. So this is a very important piece. So now we got the voters pamphlet. So I'm advising folks, pull out your voters pamphlet. When you get the flyers, you separate them. Okay, fine. If they're running for the school board, if they got kids in there, put them on that side. If they don't have kids, round file them. If they got, now we talk about the bonding measure. If they got one set of senior citizens, they don't have the others, round file them. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then we kind of get down to business, and then take this voters pamphlet and open it up and put it on the side and say, okay, fine. Now, what's the background of these folks? Well, you can always get a professional writer to write your groups.
Yeah, yeah.
But the bottom line, always look at the people who will support them. When you look at the support, they say, oh, all the money's over here, and the people over here, that's it. Let's see, the person who's most qualified is the one that's not supported by the money. So then, that's who you vote for. That's how you do it. So I'm just giving you a sort of a sampling, and I'm just trying to share the sampling. And by the way, I ran to Channel 2 before I came here, and I knocked on the door and said, hey, look, I got a story for you. My name is Bruce Broussard, and they have a little camera. Everything is all locked up.
Yeah.
And so, well, sir, yes, sir, but you're going to have to email us. I got a story for you.
Yeah.
I got that's it. So they just, and I said, thank you.
Bureaucratic red tape.
Then I caught one of the workers going into the gate, and I said, hey, look, I got a story for you guys. So he said, oh, whoa. So I said, well, would you take a picture of this? So she took a picture of it, gave her my business card, and whatever. It's going to be interesting to see what Channel 2 did, because Steve is supposed to have something on the bonding issue next week. And if he has to be, I'm not asking to call them. Just all you do is call these folks. Just do just exactly what I'm not asking you about. I don't need to be at the forum. In fact, I'm not gonna. I can like competition. I don't want him to come on our show. I mean, he got his own thing. My point is that, but my point is I want to give him the information. That's a very important piece.
Yeah.
So hopefully he can educate people because he can do it. So that's
Talking about
it.
Steve Buell.
No, Steve Dean. Was it Steve Dean?
Oh, Steve Dean.
Yeah, your voice, my voice, or something like that. That kind of a deal.
Columnist for the Oregonian,
The
Steve
columnist
Dean.
type,
We
yeah,
know him
he does the
well.
whole deal. Okay, that's it. I didn't talk
And-
too much more. I had more to do, but anyway. You got anything? Oh, let Don do that. But real quick, like.
Well, if you're a veteran, you need to have be aware of your veterans benefits.
Federal
Bruce-
benefits.
Yeah, federal benefits for veterans. Bruce introduced me to some of my benefits, and I'm ever eternally grateful for it every time the check comes, and I appreciate it.
I knew that was the only thing you did. That's why I gave you the pepper salad.
But you know, I deserve it. So
But all in seriousness, folks, we got some serious times right now. I mean, really look at
we
the
got
voters.
summer coming on.
Hey,
Yes.
ask these candidates who in the heck are they? Very important. We need leadership. And to Ted, in all due respect, I respect you, man, but there's no OJT time. And maybe you need to pick up the phone and give Don a call. He can. Otherwise, you can call Theresa, and they could just go on and interview you because you need some help. Trust me, you're going to need some help. And if you don't do it, then
We've thought about actually giving him a copy of Don's book.
a copy.
Yeah.
No,
So he
get
could
the-
learn about police culture.
No, the real deal. He needs to be here. No.
Okay. All right.
You edited it, you know what I mean? But don't. But he needs to be here. Then we'll have it write another piece. See, you got JD. He can interview with JD. In fact, we're gonna get JD on. We're gonna get him on and let him do a show or two, and maybe he can interview the mayor, if you will. He might like JD better than he like Don. I know you don't like me. Don't tell him who you are, JD. But anyway. But it's a good deal, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah.
Wasn't she a beautiful host? She did good today.
She is amazing.
Isn't she amazing?
Well, so
Oh, I think I
absolutely
stopped. I
amazing.
think they. Yeah, they.
Okay, that's it.
We
done?
talked through.
Okay, good.